Break. Let's bring in John Day. He's in Santa Fe, New Mexico. John, happy Monday to you. What's your overall take of this case?
Well, thanks for having me. This is a situation where right now you're seeing the medical examiner, the pathologist testifying. If you're a prosecutor, you love this kind of testimony because jurors see a pathologist, the medical examiner, as a neutral witness. The pathologist can't say who killed this young woman, but the pathologist is setting up all this incredibly vivid, brutal, and difficult testimony about the body and the way she died and how she died and what she looked like. So you've got that going on. And then on the other hand, you've got the defendant sitting there at the defense table, and the jurors are looking to see what is his reaction to these horrifying testimony, pictures, diagrams, drawings, things like that. And he seems to be writing something down, which is certainly interesting. What in the world could he be writing? But a prosecutor is very, very happy to have this kind of testimony in front of a jury. The defense, not so much.
What do you tell your clients to do in the courtroom when they're sitting there and everybody's staring at them, and especially during times like this where it's very emotional, and jurors do, to your point, they want to see what the defendant is doing as we see these horrible pictures. What's your advice to your clients?
Right. Well, you see, when you watch jurors, their eyes will go from the testimony, from the evidence, to whatever's up on a screen, to the pathologist, back to the defendant, because they are checking out the defendant. They're saying, what is his or her reaction? I mean, this is horrifying testimony. And what in the world could he be writing down that's somehow relevant to what's going on? So generally the advice is you sit there, you don't have any facial expressions, you're watching this. Don't give away anything in your behavior and your body language. Sit there impassively and watch this, because every juror at some point during that testimony, and it's pretty horrific testimony, is going to be sneaking a glance at that defendant to see how he is reacting.
Yeah, we've had other defendants too that pretend to be writing, and it's not a good look, because to your point, what are you writing? And it's hard to pull off. Let's get a break. When we come back, we'll head back to the courtroom. We'll pick it up after the mid-morning break has concluded. State of Florida. Stay with us. Hi, John Day is still with us. That's it for the medical examiner. Boy, John, to your point earlier, this is where jurors really do take notice, and it brings not only the victim, his partner, Tanya Wise, but her baby, their baby, to life in a just horrible fashion. Just the description of the photos that the jury was seeing has to be impactful.
Yeah, these are very difficult moments for jurors. They've got to listen to this testimony, and they've got to read through or look at all the photographs that are being displayed. And again, the prosecution wants to use this to loop back to their theory about how the defendant had given her money for an abortion. She kept the money. They want to establish that there's a motive here, that for the killing. So again, it's important testimony for the prosecutor. The defense has to do what it can to try to counteract that and minimize it, bringing up issues about, well, was there an intervening independent reason that the baby might have died? Things like that. But at the end of the day, at the end of this day of testimony, the thing that the jurors are taking home with them is the horrific pathologist testimony.
The defense in their opening said there's a guy named Mark Burke who had a relationship with the victim, Tanya, and that he was told by Tanya that he was the father, so he's really the killer. Do they have to be careful in that at the end of the day, the goal here, if there's enough evidence in a lot of death penalty cases, is to keep your client alive? For jurors who are going to decide both phases of this, do you have to be careful in the guilt phase not to offend them, especially when you're talking about such a disgusting motive for a double murder?
Yeah, Ted, you really do. But again, in this case, the defense does have some things in their favor, including the idea, and it's been brought up before, but the victim was an escort. The victim did have people in her past who the defense has described as unsavory. So the defense has some things that they can use to put in front of the jury to raise reasonable doubt, to sow reasonable doubt about whether this defendant did it. And in this particular case, the fact that you have another couple of at least unsavory potential suspects, people of interest in the eyes of the defense, means that it's tough for the prosecution because they've got to make sure that they can convince these jurors beyond a reasonable doubt that it was this guy and not these 2 or 3 other guys that she was associated with.
Yeah, and if there's enough there, at least for a discussion back there in the jury room, it might even help in the penalty phase, because if there's a little bit, any bit of doubt, jurors do not want to be on the hook for taking another human being's life.